30 minutes before the sororitas made their first contact with the heretics inside the Scholastica, it was still bustling at the mess hall as lunchtime was coming to a close. Wellmanor was just about to dig in when someone sat down across the table. While the place was of a communal setup and table sharing was the norm, the fact that there were plenty of empty seats around made Wellmanor look up from her tray of food. She relaxed upon recognizing who had come to share her table. "Hey, if it isn't the scholar thrice blessed by the throne. How are you doing?" teased the newcomer, a young brunette in power armor with a friendly smile, a rare expression to be found on a battle sister. "Mireia. It has been a while," Wellmanor said to her old friend. "Indeed. Look at you, who could have guessed the meekest girl in the dorm back then could one day be slapping a high confessor?" Mireia said teasingly, putting her standard issue Sabbat pattern helmet down on the table before asking another question. "So, what made you so bold?" Wellmanor stumbled for a second, finding it hard to explain herself. "I was caught up in the moment. After witnessing the events up close, it was hard not to get angry." "Really?" Mireia asked. "I swear by the throne." It does feel like you have somehow changed." "Surely you were just pulling my leg again," Wellmanor scoffed, but found the tease not unwelcoming. Being bunkmates back at the old novitiate days meant that Mireia was one of the few associates she could comfortably lessen formalities with. Mireia's smile broadened before she bent over to whisper her next question. "So, how many miracles have you personally witnessed? And how was it?" "Witnessed miracles?" The questions triggered Wellmanor's recent memories of the vision. As the visage of the master of mankind abruptly flashed before her mind, Wellmanor found herself overwhelmed by intense emotions. "So divine, such glory. I have seen." Wellmanor so very much wanted to tell her friend and the rest of the world of what she saw before sharply remembering her promise to keep it a secret. Lost in memory of the Emperor's divine grandeur, it took a while before she finally replied, "It was glorious." By then Wellmanor finally noticed the unusual quietness that had settled on the mess hall. More alarmingly, Mireia was looking at her with a strange expression. "What?" Wellmanor asked. "Is everything all right?" Mireia asked with a hint of concern. Wellmanor suddenly became aware that tears were running down from her eyes and everyone around was looking at her. Embarrassed, she quickly wiped her tears off. Before their conversation could continue, a siren sounded. At the same time, Vox messages crackled out from most of the helmets in the mess hall, shattering the brief tranquility. Even without listening to the full messages, Wellmanor knew the battle sisters were being summoned. "Got to go. Catch up with you later," Mireia said before grabbing her helmet and hurriedly left. Wellmanor watched as her friend stormed out with the others, their armored boots cracking sharply on the monastery's marble floor before fading into the distance. Sensing the unusually tense atmosphere, Wellmanor's gut told her that this was not a drill before a pang of hunger reminded her why she was in the mess hall. Turning her attention back to her food, Wellmanor had just started drinking her soup when she was again interrupted by a buzz. Annoyed, the scholar took out her communicator and looked at the caller's identity. Upon seeing the displayed name, she quickly accepted the call. "Wellmanor speaking." "Sister Wellmanor," Palatine Domine's voice came through with her signature pitch. "Join us immediately at the primary staging area. We have an emergency mission and will be moving out soon." "Huh? But my duty." "Sister, listen to me," the normally courteous Domine interrupted, hinting at the seriousness of the situation. "Your charge left a moment ago on a gunship. We will be heading to the same area." It took a moment for Wellmanor to understand what the Palatine meant, and she stood up in shock, the sound of her spoon hitting the floor reverberating throughout the hall. "We finally made contact with the hostiles. The enemy combatants were armed men in flak armor covered by makeshift combat fatigues, and their movements suggested having received a decent amount of military training. Unfortunately for these guys, their standard-issue armor offered little to no protection against bolt rounds. They might as well have been naked when pitted against the sororitas and their bolters. The sisters, on the other hand, had more than proven their status as elite shock troops. As an avid gamer who had spent thousands of hours on first-person shooters, I was confident from the start that our advantage was overwhelming in a standard shootout. The sisters had bigger guns, power armor, better training, nerves of steel, and best of all, were provided with literal wall hacks by my abilities. How these advantages panned out in real life though far exceeded my expectations. Superior in almost every metric against our opponents, the sisters gunned our way through the grim corridors of the Scholastica, barely breaking stride as we proceeded towards the thickest concentration of enemies in the lower levels. We soon established a routine. I would hear random heretics approaching from a distance away and drop a warning, and after confirming their positions with short bursts of my detection waves, I instantly updated the tactical system and the sisters would handle the rest. It was brutal, like watching a group of seasoned Diamond League elite players mercilessly steamrolling newbies in a shooter games team deathmatch. More than once some random armed heretics would turn a corner only to have their brains and innards splattered on the walls, and the rest of their comrades hardly had the time to react before being overwhelmed by the sororitas. I witnessed firsthand how the Battle Sisters fully exploited their advantage by walking straight in, bolters blazing at near point-blank range, shouting praises to the God Emperor. The surprised cultists usually returned few if any shots, and those lucky enough to hit bounced harmlessly off the sisters' power armor. Watching the sororitas doing their work from a relatively safe distance behind, I almost pitied the cultists. The sisters on the other hand relished in their systematic destruction of the heretics and were seemingly joyous when dishing out their lethal retributions. The two leading Dominion squads with their expert usage of storm bolters especially impressed me. The sights and sounds of them rapidly laying down massive amounts of bolt rounds with such accuracy was horrifying to behold. Equally terrifying was the mess they left behind. Their gruesome work painted the drab interiors of the place with blood, human remains and miniature craters. Through it all, Alicia was exemplary as a field commander, leading from the front while dropping sharp and clear instructions to her sisters. With the sororitas doing a great job with sanctioned violence, Faberus rarely used his weapon. Though I noted that every time the Inquisitor fired his master-crafted bolt pistol, a random head would burst on the other side. His fighting style was as cold and meticulous as his personality. I was walking past another pile of dead cultists when my shoe almost stepped into a rapidly forming pool of blood. Like breaking from a trance, for the first time a realization came to me about how knee-deep I was in this bloody business of homicide. No sir. This is not a video game. People did not turn into a loot box or disappear after they got taken out. Dying cultists twitched and squirmed on the floor, lying in a puddle of their own blood, piss and innards while desperately holding on to their fading life. Looking at the sheer savagery of violence on display, a part of me who was still a pacifist normie was starting to freak out. In stark contrast, Faberus and the sororitas spared no extra glance on the fallen after making sure they were no longer a threat. I feel out of place. But there was no going back now. I asked for this after all. Recalling my reason being here, I steeled my resolve and pressed forwards. Halfway through the motion, my attention was pulled towards a particular transmission in the air and automatically tuned into it with my earpiece. After a brief wash of static, voices started popping in my ear. "Captain Mokitar, can you hear me?" asked a man, his voice harsh and hard. A heartbeat later an even harsher voice replied amidst background sounds of fierce firefights. "I hear you, go ahead. A gunship did a strafing run on our position a moment ago. Contact seems to have been lost with the topside Overwatch teams." "What? How long ago was that and why are you only informing me now?" Mokitar asked. "My apologies, it was a few minutes ago. The main Vox operator and some people were killed. We held firm and are still now pushing back the Imperial dogs. I have sent people to check on the top side and we will know what happened soon." The first voice replied. There were a few deep breaths before Mokitar spoke again. "Did you get a good look at what type of gunship it was? Am I to assume the corpse worshippers had inserted troops from the top of the building?" Corpse worshippers was a standard derogatory term used by followers of chaos for the Imperials, due to the Emperor of Mankind being a literal corpse since the end of Horus heresy. I had come across the term many times in stories about this universe. To hear it in real life with such a hateful tone added a layer of indescribable context. No idea of the gunship model, it went by too fast to be identified, the first voice responded. Judging from the 2 samples here, having a harsh deep voice that made you sound like a typical B-movie's bad guy might be a prerequisite to climb the heretical leadership ladder. That said, this Mokitar guy was really quick on the uptake. They will soon know we are here. With a flick of my mind, I jammed the channel with static noise like it was the most natural thing. A bit stumped by my own reflexive action, I turned to Thabrus and tried to pick up signs if he noticed what just transpired, only to receive a questioning look from the Inquisitor. I spoke into the command channel that connected me, Thabrus and Alisaya. The heretic commander outside just contacted their main leader in the building. They are aware of our possible insertion. The Palatine paused slightly upon hearing what I said but quickly resumed her stride. What did they say? Thabrus asked. I noted the Inquisitor did not even bother to inquire about how the information was acquired. They are sending people to check on their roof teams, so our advantage of surprise should expire soon. I have jammed their channel for now. I answered just as another transmission flared up, prompting me to join in automatically again. My captain, can you hear me? The first voice came through again. Instinctively I knew this was a different channel, probably a backup. My mind turned and I realized a lot more could be done. I first jammed the new channel before unjamming the previous channel, in the process connecting myself to Mokitar. Activating thought acceleration, I synthesized the voice of the first heretic in my head before playing the result on the other side. My captain, can you hear me? I even used the same line. You broke off for a while, speak. Mokitar, who had stayed on the first channel, replied, sounding impatient with echoes of a heavy gun battle still raging around him. Thinking fast, I started to bullshit Mokitar. My men have reached the roof, the topside teams are badly mauled by the gunship but there are survivors. They reported no troop insertion. I repeat, no troops. Then I trailed off, jammed the channel again and left it at that. Ending the call, the absurdity of me pranking a cultist leader almost made me laugh out loud, despite the fact I just witnessed some highly unpleasant and gruesome events up close. Is this a coping mechanism? I noticed Thabrus was giving me his "what's up?" look. I shrugged and said, I bought us some time, but it won't be long. Just as that statement was made, my mind picked up yet another transmission flaring up on a new and different channel. Bastards are persistent, too bad, I will just jam it again. Can anyone hear me? Against my expectation, a new voice came through. Similar to the heretic leader, sounds of gunshots were cracking in the background of this newcomer. Thorn here, I hear you. To my surprise, Thabrus responded to it. He lit the way forward for humanity, the new voice said without any context. Without him, we are damned and will be lost in eternal darkness. The Inquisitor replied without skipping a beat. What the? Thabrus has contacts inside this place? By the throne. Thorn, is that really you? The voice asked with barely concealed emotion. Yes, Kale, I am close. The cavalry is on its way. What happened and what is your situation? These heretics appeared suddenly out of nowhere. We are currently barricaded in the reinforced section before the plasma generators. How close are you? Asked Kale, whoever this person was. Very close. How long can you hold? There was another round of intense exchange of gunfire before Kale's voice came through again. Not for long, we are pinned hard. Hold on just a little longer, help is on the way. Thorn out? Thabrus finished his conversation before speaking into the command channel, move faster, we have people in dire need of our aid. Before long we reached a junction where constant gunshots could be heard and I sensed a lot of people in front. It was the main event. I ordered the team to hold before sending out a wide detection wave to scan the area. Immediately a detailed three-dimensional image of the area solidified in my mind, and enemy positions lit up like angry rashes on an infected skin. There were more than 4 dozen heretics between us and the besieged Imperials. The way forward was narrowed down into a long corridor about 50 meters in length leading into another wider area. The corridor was guarded by 2 small squads of cultists, rear guards to watch their backs. Mokitar was not taking any chances despite my attempts at misdirection. As I updated the tactical information and shared it to my team, the opposition's numerical advantage made even Thaberus pause. "So many, we need a plan," the Inquisitor whispered. "You got any suggestions?" I asked. "It would be nice if we could have a few grenades exploding in their midst," Thaberus said almost jokingly before asking, "Do you still intend to attempt capturing the leader in this situation?" Earlier that day, to make my case to tag along, I had reasoned with Thaberus that it would be quite safe as the enemies would not expect me to show up. While the Inquisitor conceded on that point, he still saw no reason for me to take the risk. Needing a push, I upped the ante and offered to attempt capturing the enemy leader alive with my unconventional abilities if permitted to go. That notion of being able to retrieve valuable information greatly tempted Thaberus, and in response he threw an inquisitive side glance at Neandra. The Imperial assassin was silent for a while before shrugging and dropped her verdict: "If she is serious, there might be no better qualified person on this planet for the task." Looking at the enemy composition, it would be a low-risk combat experience for her. With Neandra vouching for me, Thaberus finally conceded to let me join the mission. Now it was time to prove the value of my words. Activating thought acceleration, everything around me slowed down as I studied the situation in greater detail. There were a myriad of dead bodies scattered across the area, hinting at the intensity of battle that had been raging for a while now. What caught my attention was some unusual figures with distinctive, sinister-looking armor amongst the fallen. Who are these? Chaos elite troopers? At a loss of what I was seeing, my attention shifted back to the situation at hand. Currently the heretic main force was focusing on the entrenched Imperials with 2 small squads watching their back. Now that I think about it, since our opponents were all unaugmented humans, Thaberus' casual mention of grenades attack was not a bad idea. Grenades being a standard wargear for the well-armed sororitas, I could get a few from them, then go in shrouded for the attack. Crude but effective. With the idea in place, I double-checked my readings on the individuals guarding the corridor, carefully examined each and every one of them for advanced optics or eye implants that might spoil my plan. I found nothing that seemed capable of bypassing my stealth field. This could work. Now I just needed to locate and capture Mokitar alive to complete all my objectives. Looking at my readings, I noticed an individual in the middle of the main heretic ranks that might be the leader. Unlike his comrades, this person wore a proper set of carapace armor complete with shoulder pads decorated with extra spikes. Going by my meta-knowledge regarding the forces of chaos, being extra spiky was definitely a mark of status. My gut feelings informed me this was Mokitar, but I had to be sure. I sent out a short sensor wave targeting this individual before connecting myself to the first channel the heretics had used. "Captain, do you read me?" I masqueraded as his subordinate again. In real time, I witnessed the prime suspect touching his earpiece before a familiar harsh voice came through on my side. "Speak." Bingo. That's the heretic captain right here. I dropped and jammed the channel again. It was time to execute my plan. "Alysia," I called out, beckoning her. "Yes?" The Palatine came over respectfully. "2 frag grenades, please," I requested with my hands out. Alysia hesitated for a half a second before dutifully taking off 2 of those deadly devices from her pouch and offered them to me. The grenades felt cold and hard to the touch. For a second I was about to remark about them being surprisingly lightweight before remembering my transhuman strength. "What is the fuse time and the effective ranges for these?" I asked, needing the details to plan my attack. 4 to 5 seconds after the safety pin is removed. Resulting blast is lethal within a radius of 5 meters, incapacitating up to about 15 meters for standard humans. Alysia answered smoothly. While I expected an informative answer, until this moment it never crossed my mind that a pretty young lady like her could be so well versed on details for such horrible stuff. It felt wrong. That aside, there was still a final hurdle that proved to be a headache. How was I supposed to pull this off without exposing my stealth ability? I was still confirming with Alysia about how to properly pull grenade pins when Thabros, who was watching from the side, voiced his concerns. For real? And how do you plan to deliver these? Before I could say anything, there was a sudden, loud explosion in the front. As everyone instinctively turned to look, in slow motion I realized this was my chance. Pushing thought acceleration to the max, I activated my Shadow Walk ability and dashed out with all my strength. In the blink of an eye, I passed by the sisters in front of us. None reacted. No one saw I ran out. My hearts were racing, for I was about to do something that would either be very awesome or very stupid. It was the moment of truth as I rushed into the corridor with a grenade in each hand. My heart pumped faster as I was half expecting rounds to be cracking at me by this point. No shots came. In the long corridor, some of the heretic rearguards were looking back at their main force, checking on the commotion. As for the others who were still watching the corridor, none reacted to my entry. It worked. Exerting myself, I crossed over 50 meters of the enemy defensive line in less than 3 seconds. While dashing over many dead bodies, I got a good look at the unusual figures from earlier. Their armor was jet black and looked even more sinister up close, but weirdly these did not feel like they belonged to the enemy. Still totally clueless of these mysterious figures, I pushed them out of my head and focused back on the mission. Uncontested, I reached the end of the corridor and slipped into the main heretic crowd. This was by far the most horrible place of what I had seen in the Scholastica. The air was dusty with a persistent smell of gunpowder, sweat, blood and bodily waste. Debris, dead bodies and countless spent bullet casings littered the whole place, while angry men with desperate energy were moving about, shooting and cursing. Making a beeline towards my target, I avoided colliding with a few random heretics due to my pseudo-invisibility and soon found myself standing beside the heretic leader. Mokitar was an intimidating figure. Tall and muscular, he had the face of a seasoned fighter that hinted of crawling out from some ghetto hellhole to become its champion. Standing close to 6 feet tall, he radiated an exceedingly cruel aura, the type of person that would make past life me flinch by his mere attention. The heretic leader's imposing quality was further amplified by his choice of fashion. He wore a set of dark carapace armor, both his helmet and his shoulder pads were decorated with sharp-looking large spikes. A huge chaos symbol was painted proudly in blood red over his chest piece, while another metallic emblem of chaos hung from his neck, as if anyone could misidentify his allegiance. Marking Mokitar's individualism further, he was carrying a large decorated combat shotgun instead of an autogun, like the rest. The whole fearsome appearance was completed with some freshly cut human ears hanging on his belt, trophies that were still dripping blood. Not pleasant at all. While Mokitar barked orders to his underlings, I surveyed the area and soon identified 2 prime spots for maximum carnage. After running a few quick simulations inside my head on grenades throwing to ensure accuracy, it was time for action. Still shrouded, I pulled the safety pins off my grenades, and then counted 2 seconds before tossing one to each side. As the primed grenades bounced into their respective positions with deadly precision, I dismissed my shroud and dropped my greetings. "Hello, Mokitar." My abrupt appearance made all the cultists turn to me in shock. Even the heretic leader himself flinched at the sudden development, but it was too late for them to react. Going psychically active, I unleashed my power like that misfiring incident at the monastery, but this time done on purpose. My halo blasted out in blinding radiance with a powerful psychic message, "Repent." And then the grenades exploded. It was 10 minutes after the sororitas' battle convoy had embarked from their monastery to the Scholastica, and Wellmanor was swaying to the motion of a rhino-armored transport as it thundered towards the combat zone. As a non-combatant, Wellmanor was given one of the innermost seats, just beside the entrance to the driver's compartment. Sitting across her was a grim-faced Malin who they picked up just before leaving. Moments earlier Malin had shown up last minute at the staging area, somehow catching wind of the situation. The preacher had quickly kicked up a fuss as she demanded to come along. Domine had considered leaving the mini-storeroom representative behind, and the Palatine had even quietly consulted with Wellmanor about the possible repercussions for such an action that bordered on outright insubordination against the Church. In a decision that Wellmanor herself was unsure of being pragmatic or sympathetic for Malin, she advised against it. Silently Wellmanor suspected it came down to the fact she could not imagine herself being left out of something like this. So the scholar and the priest eventually shared the same ride together with Domine and her retinue of Celestian squad. The stern-faced elite sisters paid little heed to the pair of non-combatants, their dull silver power armor and cold optics flickering in the dim interior light, cold metals clicking as they checked and rechecked their many sanctified weapons. Palatine Domine was seated furthest away from Wellmanor, just beside the rear access ramp as per the sororitas' tradition of being the first to step into a battlefield as the leader. Eyes closed and arms crossed, Domine was motionless while her Vox unit buzzed constantly with tactical updates. Just as Wellmanor had started to drift off, Domine's eyes suddenly snapped open and she started speaking into her Vox. Too far away to hear the Palatine's conversation, Wellmanor's mind nevertheless started darting around, imagining the worst scenarios. Is she getting some bad news? Did anything happen to Lady SYRINE? No, that's not possible, she's a miniature Primarch after all. It is not like those damned heretics can be more dangerous than a greater demon. Domine looks so serious though, but then again, she always looks serious. Sister Wellmanor, Preacher Malin. Being suddenly addressed by Domine jolted Wellmanor to attention, and what the Palatine said next surprised her further. Would any of you like to join a forward strike force? The Inquisition is kind enough to divert their gunship for us to deliver a team straight into the Scholastica. I am commanding the convoy so I won't be going. If you are keen. I am going. Malin raised her hands in response before Domine finished her words. Somehow the idea that the preacher was more devoted than herself irritated Wellmanor. Raising her hand, she responded the only way possible. I am going too. The world around me descended into utter mayhem after I dropped my holy flashbang grenade attack. What was intended to be a brief distraction ended up a hell lot more effective than I anticipated. Whether they were wounded by my grenades or not, almost all the cultists in my vicinity were shrieking in agony. I read intense emotions of terror, confusion and regret from their minds, and any semblance of military discipline they had previously displayed had vanished without a trace. In the midst of the pandemonium, Mokitar screamed and swung at me with his shotgun, using it as an improvised club. Things slowed down as I focused on the cultist captain. He was not incapacitated like the others despite receiving my psychic blast at point-blank range, proving himself to be made of sterner stuff. Still it was clear that he was severely affected as blood was streaming down from his nose and his eyes were closed. I easily avoided his desperate attack, then retaliated by smashing his right arm just below the shoulder pad. Something broke with a gruesome snap. Mokitar let out a muted screech and dropped his massive shotgun. I reached out before the weapon even hit the floor, grabbed the heretic leader by his throat and almost instantly regretted it. Not only was his skin rough and sweaty to the touch, it came with an odd sensation that felt off. Despite being still in shock, Mokitar displayed impressive reflexes by immediately pulling out a serrated combat knife with his left hand and slashed out. His movements flowed so seamlessly that I could easily envision them honed through a lifetime of deadly bouts. The sinister-looking weapon was even coated with a thin layer of unknown liquid. Poisoned blade? This guy is a real nasty piece of work. Unfortunately for the heretic captain, while he was remarkably fast for a human, his opponent was a mini-godling, and in my view his knife was moving at a snail's pace. I casually intercepted the attack with a right-hand chop onto his wrist, breaking more bones and causing him to let out a muffled scream of pain before dropping the knife. After losing both weapons, Mokitar finally overcame his temporary blindness and got a good look at me. His eyes widened with disbelief as he uttered, "The False Saint? Ha, so they even have a nickname for me." While our clash took only a few seconds, a few nearby cultists turned shakily to me with weapons raised. Too slow. I quickly lifted Mokitar up despite his protests, and swung him like a living club to smash the nearest combatants away, probably breaking something else in the process as he fainted after that. That done, it was time to go and face the second biggest hurdle of my plan, the question of whether my shroud would work while carrying an extra person. While having no idea on the limitations of this ability, I was cautiously optimistic and consigned this to a 50-50 chance of luck. In gaming terms, it was a roll of 4+ out of a 6-sided dice. I lifted the motionless Mokitar and placed him unceremoniously over my shoulder like a sack of potatoes, then dismissed my halo to activate Shadow Walk. The odd sensation of something off hit me again and nothing happened. No Shadow Walk. Come on. For the love of? Half panicking, I looked around and noted the cultists were slowly recovering from their shock. Shroud or not, it was time to move. Since I would be running back without Shadow Walk, my allies needed to be notified in case of friendly fire. With a flick of my mind, I connected myself to our open channel and spoke into the comms. "Sisters, be advised, I am coming back." "Lady SYRINE? Where did you go?" Alisaya cut in, sounding uncharacteristically anxious. "Location tracker shows you are somehow in the front," Thabris interrupted with a flabbergasted tone. "Don't tell me you just went in and apprehended the leader?" "Location tracker?" I was puzzled for a split second before noticing a faint signal emanating from my new earpiece, a built-in feature. "Yes, I am returning with a prisoner." "Don't shoot." I cut the link and started my journey back. Silently praying my prisoner would survive the short trip, I readied myself for the gauntlet and sent out Auspex to check the situation in the long corridor. What I saw shocked me. The sororitas were charging over, heedless of the Overwatch fire about to be laid down by the entrenched enemy rearguards. Fortunately, most of these guys were still distracted by the unusual commotion behind them and were slow to react, but by now they had finally noticed the sisters and hurriedly started shooting. "Oh no, you don't." With Mokitar still over my shoulder, I dashed through the corridor, covering a huge distance in 2 quick leaps and crashing at full speed into a 2-man heavy weapons team camping at the very end. I landed with a solid kick on an individual who had just fired a few shots of his heavy stubber at the oncoming sisters. The man's life ended with a sickening crunch and the momentum sent his body over the barricade. His companion cursed and came at me with a bayonet. In my heightened state, I saw the blade coming at a snail's pace and noted his speed, or the severe lack of it. "You have no chance." With my free hand I backhanded my attacker's face before his bayonet traveled half the distance needed to reach me, and an appalling sensation from my hand informed me that more than teeth were sent flying. The impact violently rotated the man's head well beyond the turning limit of his neck, and he was already dead before hitting the ground. Sorry not sorry for showing no mercy. All around me the cultists had started cracking their weapons at the rushing sisters and rounds could be seen bouncing off their power armor. Desperate to stop them from shooting my girls, I looked around before landing my sights on the heavy stubber mounted in front of me. Just need to aim and pull the trigger, right? I dropped Mokitar and quickly picked up the massive gun from its mount. A stubber was similar to a .50 caliber heavy machine gun, and while normally it would be unfeasible for a single person to wield the weapon unmounted, I had my transhuman strength to make it work. Pointing the weapon at the nearest cultists, I pulled the trigger of a real firearm for the first time in my life. The stubber roared to life as the recoil started kicking into my hands. My shots landed close but did not hit any targets. My disappointing first salvo, however, had spooked the cultists, and immediately a few of them turned to point their guns at me. While the odds of me dying to small arms fire was slim to none, the sheer desperation of the moment was catching on to me. In time-dilated slow motion I saw an impending disaster. The sisters were still rushing over as most of the cultists were lining up their shots behind heavy cover, and terrible mental images of Alisaya and the sisters being killed due to my inability flashed before my mind. Pressured, something in me snapped. Like in a trance, I aimed to shoot again, but this time my body automatically adjusted to compensate for the recoil observed earlier. My aim went downwards, I took a proper stance, held a tighter grip, my breathing stopped to reduce movement and, headshot. The head of a cultist closest to pulling his trigger on me exploded like an abused watermelon, and the splattering of brain matter stunned his nearby comrades. What the? Before I realized what just happened, my aim had already moved on to the next imminent threats, my finger lightly pressing the trigger each time I felt a lock on my target. Headshot, headshot and headshot. I watched in equal parts fascination and horror as the heads of my enemies started exploding one after another, like some after-party balloons popping ritual in one of those many annual dinners from a lifetime ago. Gun blazing with hit after hit, I seemed to instinctively know where my bullets would land like it was the surest thing. Is this how ballistic skill 2+ feels like in real life? An instant later I was shooting my weapon like an action hero from a classic blockbuster movie, firing a ridiculously large gun at full auto but somehow consistently hitting my marks. The cultists panicked and cowered for their lives, but there were little places to hide from my terrifying barrage. The barrel of my gun flashed repeatedly, spent bullet casing rained one after another from my stub as I rapidly switched between targets, landing most if not all my shots like an aimbot cheater on the hapless heretics. By the time the sisters and the Inquisitor reached me, I had spent almost all the ammunition in my massive gun and single-handedly took out the entire rear guards, leaving them dead or dying on the floor. My lady. Alisaya was the first to reach. She flipped her helmet visor and hurriedly checked on me, anxiety written plainly over her beautiful face. My hearts were pounding, more for being in a heightened state than physical exertion. I am fine, I forced a half-smile, my mind still reeling from what had just happened. For a second I considered reprimanding Alisaya for her decision on simply rushing over, but then I recalled how during the Great Crusade era Astartes of the old legions seemed to have the same habit of disregarding everything else when it came to safety issues concerning their father primarchs. I need to consider this tendency of theirs in future events. Seeing that everyone had their eyes on me, I dropped the heavy stubber which had become warm to the touch and picked up Mokitar from the ground. I got the heretic captain right here, I announced with a tone way calmer than what I was experiencing inside. The Inquisitor and the sisters looked at my prisoner and my handiwork, stunned for words. From their minds I could tell most of them were quite confused as to what just happened. And you said you don't know how to use a gun, Faberus finally remarked as he surveyed the freshly created slaughterhouse around us. Looking at the scene of butchery that was of my own creation, I felt a deep chill as the Emperor's cold words rang in my head again. You are a weep no, you back the hell off. I pushed that uneasy notion out of my mind and answered Faberus. That was the first time in my memory I fired a gun. My comment simply earned another subtle for real look from the silent Inquisitor. Feeling a bit sick of excessive real-life violence at this point, I turned to Alisaya while motioning to the far end, I am leaving the rest of them to you. The Palatine snapped to attention and gave her command. Sororitas, forward. With that the sisters continued pushing forwards to do what they do best. Try leaving one or two alive, Faberus reminded as the sisters moved past. I watched them go and heaved a sigh of relief. Just as I felt like finally patting my own back for a job well done, a strange sensation came over from my captive. I turned to Mokitar and found him conscious but shivering with more blood trickling down from his mouth and nose. Despite looking exceedingly unwell, Mokitar was staring at me with an inhuman amount of hatred. Even without mind reading, his eyes told me what he was thinking. You will never get anything from me. Something is wrong. I turned to Faberus who was already on the task. The Inquisitor quickly removed the heretic's helmet and checked on him. After a brief examination Faberus dropped his expert opinion. Suicide pill. Probably a unique cocktail stored in a false tooth and just activated. He will expire soon, there is not much we can do, So he is already a dead man? Feeling let down by the sudden development, I wanted to be sure. Pretty much, Thabros nodded. I suggest you probe his mind as extensively as possible with his remaining time. His statement sounded doubly grim as weapons started cracking again in the background. Very well, I will see what we can learn, I said while powering up. Again the nearby psychic souls flared up, but I ignored them. My focus was on this important task at hand. It would be like the mental interrogation I did with the Space Marine, but this time with no consideration of the subject's well-being. I put the dying heretic captain in a sitting position with his back on a barricade before squatting down to touch his forehead. It felt strange. For a man who was at death's door, there was a lot more resistance than expected. Intrigued, I observed the flow of my energy through him and soon discovered the reason. Moving quickly, I took off the metallic chaos symbol that was hanging around the heretic's neck and tossed it aside. That emblem was more than just a trinket, it was providing a level of protection from psychic activity. Which made sense, he was assaulting an Imperial Psyker institution after all. It might be the reason why my shadow walk did not work just now. I attempted mind reading by touching Mokitar's forehead again, and this time there was little resistance. Plus hello again, plus I said directly in the heretic leader's mind, and his eyes widened upon hearing my voice in his head. Mokitar seemed to understand my intentions and tried to struggle, but by this point the lethal poison had taken its toll and he was too weak to resist. I looked at him closely. In his eyes my own reflection was staring back, eyes gleaming with golden shine and looking a lot less friendly than usual. Plus you brought this upon yourself, plus I informed Mokitar before tapping into my powers for an aggressive mind dive. The world went white as I slipped into his synapses.